we are discussing wedding photography, film versus digital, and just really all the ins and outs of photography. So I'm going to turn it over to Carlos first. So Carlos, when someone is looking for their photographer, what are some of the items they should be focusing on?
So I think one of the major key factors for them to be focusing on is, of course, the way the photography looks and the way they connect with the overarching look of their photography. But one of the major issues is that couples forget that the photographer is going to be with them throughout the whole day. So I think it's really important for you to get to know the photographer, get to know their persona and how they interact with other people. Are they hyper, and are you driving with that? Or is the photographer a little bit more calm? I mean, there's all kinds of ways to photograph a wedding, and you have to make sure that that photographer compensates best your wedding day. So get to know your photographer, talk to them face to face if you can, if not over the phone. You kind of get a sense of who they are and how they interact. I've always told all of my couples, if you're going to hire a photographer, hire them first for an engagement session, and then that's the best way to figure out how they're going to interact with you during the wedding, because it's completely a really, really good way to see how they interact with you. Mm-hmm. So that's like one of my top first things that I would say about a photographer.
Awesome. You know, as we discussed in the very beginning, this is, you know, film and digital. Both you and Deyla, Deyla, actually, you started off in film, if I remember correctly, and then digital.
Yeah.
And Carlos, you mostly deal with film photography, but you have the ability to go digital if that's the case. Do you believe that when somebody is picking their photographer, that it really, based on their venue, that they should be swayed in one direction or another? Or how would you, like, if a client came to you and said, I'm, you know, at the Portland Art Museum, would you, how would you proceed with something like that? Or does it even matter?
Sure. So I think a good photographer would be able to photograph in both scenarios, and you know, in a place that it's indoor or a place that it's outdoor. Film tends to be a little bit better when you're outdoors and you have a lot of light, or maybe an indoor location that has a ton of light inside. You can shoot indoors with additional lighting, and that can be done. I've done that before. It just takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of setup, and there's obviously a lot of lights everywhere, which in some cases, maybe the couple would not like that. For other reasons, I feel that film photography usually shines in locations that there's a lot of light. So if you are looking for a photographer that shoots only film, or you want only film shot at your wedding, I think the best would be to look at locations that are outdoors. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, so like I said, it's probably going to be people driving with tractors.
Oh, you're fine.
But like I was saying, I lost my train of thought, but I think I was saying indoors, people can shoot with film. They're just not going to look the same as most. For example, if you look at my Instagram account, most of the pictures I show are outdoor venues and outdoor settings, because that's kind of where film shines. I have done multiple cases where, you know, I shoot film indoors, but it looks different. It just doesn't look exactly the same. With digital, you can make it look similar. Either way, I mean, a good photographer, even if you shoot film or you shoot digital, you'll make it match and make it look similar. But if you're looking specifically for film, I say try to look for an outdoor venue.
Yeah. Awesome. Kind of on that same boat, Deyla, knowing that there's so many styles out there, how do you go about educating a potential client on what they will get?
Gosh, there's, you know, one of the biggest things I firmly believe, and I think we talked about this, Carlos, is that just being able to see a full gallery of just how consistent, you know, the gallery is, and how consistent the day that, you know, they photograph. Because it could be, you know, sometimes you never know what you see on their portfolios or their Instagram or whatever. It doesn't really truly reflect on how the entire day is like shot. You know what I mean? So I feel like the galleries is a huge thing. If you can send, ask for a full gallery, maybe one that's close to the venue, like venue type that they're getting married at, whether it's a ballroom, whether it's a vineyard, on the gorge, on the river, whatever, just to kind of give them the closest piece to what would be the most, cohesive of what they're kind of going for, if that makes sense. So yeah, for sure. That's like my number one for sure. And usually it's like when I get inquiries and stuff like that, they're like, so I know this is weird, but is there any way we can maybe see, a full gallery? And I'm like, why is this weird? I'll send them 3 or 4, you know what I mean? I have no problems, like, sure, go ahead, take a look and stuff, just to kind of, just because if I'm confident in, because I don't want them to look at it too and be not happy with like maybe the style, like, oh, they thought it was going to look all light and airy or something like that throughout the entire thing, you know what I mean, or whatnot. This way they can kind of see what it looks like in full capacity too. So yeah, I would say that would be the biggest thing.
No, of course. So we talked.
If I can add.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to what she said, I mean, I agree completely. We talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
But I think that most people have the misconception that just because you shoot film, everything's going to look the same. But it's not correct at all. You can make film look many different ways. Depends on how you light it. It depends on how you rate the film. There's so many options, and there's obviously different stocks of film that make the film look different. So like Deyla was saying, if you want to see a full gallery, to see everything, how it looks with the specific lighting and specific film stock that the photographer uses, that is absolutely the best way to see how the whole day looks.
Right. And I feel too, like if they just see, let's say they're getting married at, the Portland Art Museum, we'll just stay there. We'll just stay on that one. I love the Portland Art Museum, I love it, love it, love it. But if they just see things on your website, like if they're looking for that kind of, they're nervous about like, oh, how can you shoot inside? I see mostly outdoor stuff on your website and stuff like that. So just to kind of calm their nerves a little bit too, just sending them like, here, I want you to look at this reception. I want you to look at this so you can kind of see that, being, like he said, being a good photographer, it's versatile in all lighting situations. We are like ready for anything to be thrown at us basically. So yeah, for sure.
On the topic of lighting, I mean, is there types of lighting? So let's just say whether you're talking about Portland Art Museum or even a place like Castaway, which is very popular out here, those that want to highlight certain features, whether they're pin spotting their centerpieces or doing uplights around the perimeter, or even some people use gobos for their initials and everything else, whether it be on the dance floor or against the curtain in the art museum. Is there certain types of lighting that you encourage versus discourage when it comes to either the film or digital?
Which one of us?
Kind of at you, but once you start, and Carlos, you can kind of.
Sure.
Okay. So for me, like, anything that's more like any of those kind of indoor spaces that kind of have the less available light, maybe no windows, you know what I mean? Yes. So we try to seek out what's available to us. You know what I mean? Myself personally, using, OCF, off camera flash, or, any of those kind of lighting setups and stuff, that is last resort for me. That's just not my style. So, but I do have it and I do bring it for the instance of like, just in case, such scenarios and stuff like that. So, but things like pin lighting on tables and stuff like that too, is great, if it's done well. And I'm not a big fan of the gobo lightings. I would call it gobo lighting with the initials, especially if they're like usually on the dance floor and stuff, because sometimes it could get on, it just looks kind of like it, I don't know, right, Carla? Do you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of blends in, the light will be all pieced on their bodies, or like, laser lights or any of those kind of things, or, the more natural light, the better. Candlelight's great if there's enough of it. Like I said, I kind of play off of, using candles. Like you'll see me like holding a candle sometimes through it and things like that, just to kind of borrow that light. You know what I mean? So But yeah.
Carlos, do you have
Well said.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add. I think that that's perfectly well said. As photographers, we're always searching for light. I mean, obviously, any photo you see, it's a calculation of how much light was bounced back into the lens, essentially. So we're going to be looking for as much light as we can, whether it's artificial light or natural light. But obviously, natural light looks, like the word says, more natural.
Yeah.
You can make artificial light look as natural as natural light, but it just takes a lot more. And Deyla was saying, it's just, you start having all kinds of equipment up that you probably don't want in your wedding.
Well, and I'm a packet light kind of girl. I don't like to bring big setups to weddings. I feel like it's super intrusive sometimes, and I don't, you know what I mean? I want to make sure I'm not missing out on anything. So if I can the less I can bring, the better. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to take the time to set it up, then you're taking time away from other things.
Yeah.
Which again, like, kind of falls into my next question for both of you. You know, what's your process? Like, you know, everybody wants a certain amount of detail grabbed at their wedding. Some people do the, you know, first look. Some people don't, and not getting into what's better or the other. But in general, what do you find is your process for grabbing your details that you find most important? Carlos, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so for most couples, we talk about their schedule. We go deeply into, I give them examples of what a schedule could look like. And then once they give me their schedule, then we go over how much time I spend in each item. And then we go over, okay, are we going to need more time to capture those little details? Some couples say, you know what, we don't need those details, and it's okay. We don't need to add any more hours or any more time on your end. But having those conversations beforehand are actually very important, so they know what to expect. For me, it just really depends on the wedding and how the wedding is laid out. Sometimes an 8-hour wedding, I have plenty of time to do little details. Sometimes an 8-hour wedding is not enough. So it just really depends on the wedding and their timeline, how many guests they have, and if you have a second photographer really helps with a lot of those details. Because I mean, I usually take on the lead on getting the details because I know they're important, and I can have the second shooter go shoot family portraits or something like that, or vice versa. It just really depends on the wedding day. I think it's just really important to talk to the planner and the photographer so the couple knows exactly where all of the time is being spent with the photographer. And every photographer, I mean, if they've been doing this for a long time, they're going to tell you where the time constraints are going to be and where you're going to need more time and how the time is going to be spent. So I just having a conversation with the photographer on what is important to you. Details are important to you or not?
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, like I agree with him. It just depends on the wedding because, you know, anything from, you know, well, lately too, I've noticed since COVID, just the smaller, less jam-packed, you know, weddings and stuff like that, you tend to have a little bit more time to play with those things. You know what I mean? So, at least so far in my experience this year, but so that's different. So like it just depends on, like, you know, the dual ceremonies, if there is any, or things like that. Sometimes you barely have, you know, you have like 20, 30 minutes or whatever to spend on details and stuff like that. So trying to make sure that you use whatever available time you have very well, and not, you know, planning for the unexpected, basically, just because things can change throughout the day. So, but yeah, like in the beginning stage of things, like the prep, during bridal prep and things like that, you know, me personally, I like to try to plan for like an hour and a half, you know, before the ceremony or before the first look or whatever, to try to knock out some bridal details. My second's doing the same thing with the groom, you know what I mean? And then going throughout that, and then getting dressed and those kind of, you know, shooting what's going around us and the anticipation and things like that. And then, but you know, sometimes that doesn't happen. So yeah, it just depends.
I mean, I have had a couple of weddings where you just don't have time during the ceremony. No. So for example, or during the day of the wedding, So some of the things that we can shoot later, for example, the invitations or the florals or things like that, we either show up a day before or a day after, and we shoot those at a different time. So that can be done. Obviously, it would be nice to have everything done the day of, just so we make sure we get everything, just because the day of, you have fresh flowers, you have everything that you need at that moment. But in some cases, we've been able to do it before or after. It just, again, not to sound like a broken record, but it really depends on the wedding and the kind of wedding that they're having.
Yeah.
Do either one of you normally supply like a list for either the planner or the bride and groom, or the groom or the brides, as far as like what they should have ready for you guys, you know, when you guys get there, like having a full invitation set, having, you know, some flowers on the side, just, you know, to detail out those boards, the bridal shoes, the rings, like, you know, and everybody's detailed shots are obviously slightly different, but do you kind of set up a parameter of what you would like, so that when you get there, you can immediately do that stuff? Or
Yeah, like for instance, I usually will, you know, if we can meet before, a month before the wedding prior, or if we do a Zoom call or whatever, how going through like the photo timeline, getting that family list and stuff like that, but also discussing the pre stuff, you know, like, so I always have, you know, the bride maybe assign like the maid of honor if the planner is not able to collect everything. So the maid of honor usually gets everything, so I don't have to bother the bride too much being like, where's this, where's that, which I try not to do at all. So usually I have, you know, everything that's going to be cohesive with like the story of that part of the day, you know, bridal shoes and any heirloom pieces that they're going to be. I always have the bride at least have both their rings. Sometimes that doesn't work, you know, sometimes the guys already have them, and, you know, whatever, we could shoot those later. But any of those kind of things, having them in one location in the house, I just get pointed to that location, and then I start going from there and pulling things and things like that. So I don't have to disrupt looking around everywhere for those things. So, but yeah, that's all pre-discussed before.
Yeah, I mean, I do exactly the same. So we send an email kind of reminding the couple. Yeah. I think it's like a couple of weeks before, of like the little items to, hey, don't forget to have things that are important, because as photographers, we would never know that the bride is wearing some sort of, you know, necklace that her grandma gave her or something like that. We would never know unless it's pointed out to us. So I always try to remind them. And even the day of, like you said, I usually have someone appointed, which is usually the planner, but if the planner's not there, Deyla, just like you, it's usually the maid of honor who's helping us get all that stuff done. So maid of honor is usually key. Yeah.
They always are. They always are. And
or man of honor, whoever's there.
Or, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing I actually try to do with even my clients is, when it comes to our timeline, we actually at the very end make like a bridal party timeline and a main timeline. And in that bridal party timeline that is given to them the night before, we list out everything just to make sure that like the maid of honor or the groom of honor, whoever it is very aware of what needs to be prepared, so that when we get there the next day and start our thing, we can just check in with that person, grab it, and be done with it. Mm-hmm. This way they can focus on having fun and not the back of the details.
Yeah.
Now, not to get in too much down the rabbit hole of budget, because I have to have that uncomfortable conversation with my clients all the time, but that's because I'm trying to show them how to spend their money. And but as far as cost, you know, when it comes to film, when it comes to digital, there are amazing facets of each one. And it really, as we said before, really comes down to the personality of your photographer, comes down to the style. Sometimes it does come down to the venue, sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, there's always going to be a cost involved. Is there a cost difference between film and digital, or what type of cost factors should people be thinking about when looking at their photographer in general? Carlos, I'm going to start with you just because of film, and then Deyla can kind of throw her piece in.
Sure. So film photography is definitely a little bit more expensive. For a photographer, we have to spend money on buying the film itself, the actual rolls, developing them, and then getting them ready so we can get them to the couple. So there's a lot more steps and a lot more costs that are incurred by the photographer when those exist. However, I feel like those, as we were talking the other day to prepare for this, I feel like those things are almost minimal compared to the experience that a photographer has. So, for example, I was thinking on my drive back this morning of why do certain photographers charge more than others? And I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone, but in general, I feel like, for example, if you go into the store, to Nordstrom's or whatever favorite store, you're going to go buy a bag that's a Gucci or Louis Vuitton or something. You know you're going to spend a little bit more money, but you know you're going to get pretty good products. You're going to get somebody who really thought out the design of this purse or shoes or whatever you're buying. So you know you're buying. Maybe it's not the perfect example because I know you're buying the name brand, but at the same time, you're buying something that you know is going to be quality, and there's going to be somebody behind it who's going to make sure that you get the product, and if something's wrong with it, they're going to do everything they can to make it right. So I feel like it's kind of similar with photographers. The longer you are in business, the more time you have had to kind of master your art, and you know that everything that comes at you, you're going to know what to do. So with the experience, the time that you have, I mean, it's a little bit more costly because you've had that experience, because you know you're getting a good photographer, because you know you're getting someone who's shot several weddings and they know what they're going to do in that day and they're going to be professionals about it. There's a lot of photographers. I mean, I feel like we all started in a place. I mean, I started charging not very much because I didn't have all the experience and I wanted to get to a place where I had more experience and be able to charge a little bit more. So I feel that when you're seeing people charge a little bit more, most of the times, again, not always, most of the time it's that experience that photographer has.
Carlos, do you remember what your first wedding cost?
Oh gosh, my first wedding was free because I actually did not. My first wedding was free because I didn't know I wanted to be a wedding photographer.
Right.
I always thought I was going to be just a normal photographer just to shoot stuff for fun. But then there was this one couple who was like, hey, you should shoot a wedding. And that was the thing. That's where it started. But I think the very first time I charged, I think it was like $300 or something like that.
Mine was about $350. I found the old contract. And it was so embarrassing to look at it because I'm like, wow. I was like, put something in a word really quick, and then it's like, oh, total $350. I'm like, oh god. Yeah. Like for an 8-hour day and all this stuff. But that was 15 years ago. So
yeah. I think it also, as you become more seasoned in your photography and everything in an actual business, you're having to invest in a lot of other things. You're having to have insurance. You're having to have a place to like edit your photos. You have to have advertising. There's a lot that goes into a business. So once you start factoring all that stuff, then you have to realize, well, you have to somewhat put that into your prices so you don't go out of business.
Right.
So those are things that once you become familiar with those and you start figuring out how much you need to be charging to be able to make a living off of this. And like I said, just with time, you get to figure out what that number is for every photographer.
And you also have the price of film too on top of it.
Correct. So yes. So film absolutely has a factor in it. But like I was saying, I think the biggest factor is your experience. But the film is expensive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much. It's so expensive now compared to how it used to be, right?
Yeah.
Well, and the labs are a lot better these days.
They're a lot better, but the film keeps going up and up.
I know. No, I love it.
Deyla, what about you? What would
again, it's Carlos said it pretty good. I think the big difference is, and I think Carlos has been doing this for a while too, if I'm correct. How long have you been doing this?
I think it's been like 11 years now.
Yeah, for a long time. So, being seasoned and really just knowing your stuff, just trying to, and constantly educating yourself, like education costs, you know what I mean? Money, insurance, the things, our second, third, fourth, whatever photographers that are on our teams and stuff like that, it costs, for insurance for them and also paying them as well. is a huge cost factor too. And I know a lot of people, you know, shoot solo, you know what I mean? So don't have that into their costs. Although I don't know if I could do that again, but
It's really hard
I really
shooting
rely
solo
on
now.
my seconds. Yeah. If you have a good team, then stick with them as long as you can. So,
Yeah.
but I think the biggest is experience. You know, I have, you know, obviously our websites, our galleries. You know, I have a special packaging that I send to my clients. You know, I kind of try to spoil my clients as much as I possibly can throughout, just because that's just kind of my way of doing things. So, you know, a little gift here and there, you know, trying to, the final product, you know, they get a big package in the mail with images, and, you know, that comes in this beautiful box and things like that, and images. And so you got to put all that into the price, you know, so to try to along with the experience, you know what I mean? So, I think experience and that is definitely a huge factor, but I don't know. Do you want us to get like numbers?
No, before we get into numbers,
Starting numbers? I don't know.
No, I think that, Carlos, you really spelled it out very well. I mean, the thing is a lot of us, you know, have tons of experience behind us, you know,
Yeah.
whether we're, you know, from a planner's perspective, you know, I didn't always have my company, but I was in corporate and, you know, was a venue and, you know, did, you know, growing up, did my own wedding, did my brothers and sisters' wedding, you know, friends and family. But I mean, as Deyla just said, it's also about your education and everything else. And you're not, when somebody's even paying me my retainer or my final balance, I hope that they don't realize that I'm not just taking that money and putting into my bank. I mean, besides the fact that we all have to pay taxes on stuff, which when you're self-employed is actually a huge amount. But besides the taxes, because nobody likes that subject either, I mean, there's operating costs, there's the websites, and there's marketing, as you were saying. And, you know, there's your website and there's your email. And then I don't ever do a wedding solo. I did it, the first wedding for my company, I did solo because I was like, oh, it's a small one, it will be fine. Even the smaller ones need an assistant. It's just, you know, you want to be there for everybody, and you're one person, and you want to get, you have literally a laundry list of stuff that has to get done, and things happen. So on all your teams, you're probably always going to have more than one person, and that's actually a really good thing. And
I know backing up too is a big cost factor too. I don't know, Carlos, do you have a different, because I know film versus, you know, backing up, like what's your backup process? I'm just curious. Sorry, Danielle, I totally
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. So I have, obviously with film, once I get the film, the film itself, the lab, I don't know what lab you use, it's already backed up in the cloud. But once I get it, I have two different, the name is escaping my mind, I don't know why, hard drives. Two hard drives that they go to, just in case one fails, I have the other one, but it's also in the cloud. So essentially it's backed up in 3 different locations.
Right.
And also with digital, it's the same thing. I have my own cloud. So I have 2 different hard drives that I put them in, and then I upload it to the cloud, just to make sure that I don't lose anything. Like if my house burns down and those things burn down as well, then they're in the cloud and I can get them back.
Okay, so it's very similar then. Yeah, same, ditto. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that either one of you feel is important for our audience to hear or know about wedding photography, or about specifics of what you guys do? I think we've got a whole lot of information, a lot of good information for people.
I think another big, like when you're looking for a photographer too, I mean, there's a lot of talented people out there, you know what I mean? And whether they've been doing this for 2 years versus 20 years, you know what I mean? There's a lot of talent out there. And so it's very, there's a lot out there. So it's when people just go on and be like, I don't know what to search, you know, kind of thing. Another thing too, is I would recommend asking and talking to people, you know, that have had good experiences with their photographer, and then, you know, seeing if it meshes with, you know, because
or bad experiences as well.
Yeah. getting those referrals is like, I don't do a lot of advertising anymore. I haven't done that for a long time because it's mostly referral based. So it's become a big way of how I do things and how I get business, you know what I mean? So it's just getting to know, maybe talking to your friends, talking to associates that are like, oh my gosh, who photographed your wedding? What did you love about them? Asking them lots of questions is another good way too. So yeah. Funny. And then
there's also other vendors that you can ask. Like, for example, even as photographers, they ask us for recommendations for planners, florists. So,
right.
I mean, having worked in the industry, we know who are the better players or the players that maybe you should stay away from. But I think the vendors ourselves, I think we can give you some idea of some people to look for.
Absolutely.
Or not to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of, like, Carlos, you work with a lot of wedding planners and stuff like that, and so do I. And so it's like, which is great, but if they've hired you first, before anybody else or something like that, because of whatever reason, it's good to have, a knowledge of those that, we've enjoyed working with and that
right.
we know do a good job versus,
and it could be completely
trying to be like,
also,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be completely also the way they do things, and maybe they're not bad planners, but
no.
But sometimes it's just as a photographer and a planner. I mean, I feel like I have the planners that I get along with, and we do things like we already know how we're going to do things, and we already know how everything's going to work. So the day of, like, it's just boom, boom, boom. Like we can work with each other really well, and we know how each other work. So that's really helpful to get a team that has worked together before. Not that it's necessary, but it helps.
Well, getting that good communication, that solid good communication with your team, your creative partners is what I've kind of related that to, it's really because working together. So everybody's got to be on the same page, and, showing up at a wedding and everybody not knowing who they are, because that's the thing too. If there's any vendors that I've never had a chance to work with or whatever that I see on their vendor list, I want to reach out to them just to introduce myself, say, hey, maybe set up one of these, virtual just conversation, just have some coffee and get to know them, because I like to get to know who I'm going to be working with. You know what I mean? Even if they're in and out really quick, I still want to know something about them. You know what I mean? So, and when it comes to social media, we're tagging these people, we're bouncing these photos here and there, and we're trying to get everybody their beautiful images. So yeah,
for sure.
No, and even as planners, I mean, we're the same way. Sometimes we come in, from the very beginning, and we're kind of, directing the stream on it. And then sometimes we're coming in at the very end to bring all those details together. And if we don't know a vendor to, I at least always try to reach out and, again, have a phone conversation, have coffee, have a glass of wine, something. So you really understand that personality. But I mean, it really, at the end of the day, it is a collaborative effort on all the vendors' parts. Especially the communication for us is huge. And so, as you said, Deyla, there's a ton of amazing photographers, all different vendors out there. I do try to be transparent with my clients, but also based on their personalities and based on, every different vendor, every different artist, again, has their own style, has their own personality. And so even if somebody is really amazing at, a certain talent, it doesn't mean that they're going to be the best fit for that client either. And you want the client to have the best experience from beginning to end, not just a great end product. So that is also something to take into consideration.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
So
just because they're most expensive ones doesn't mean that they're the best for you.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. And, that's another thing too, like when we're talking about price and stuff is yes, coming with the territory, the one we're being more seasoned tend to be a little bit more expensive than versus somebody that's maybe just starting out, still really good at what, their craft and stuff like that. But so it just, if budget is a big deal, in the scenario of, wedding planning, which most of the time it is. So that's something to take into consideration, that if or if you just love this, you need this photographer, you know, personality just matches, their work, everything else and stuff like that, then trying to make it work for you is always a good thing too. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. This has been great, guys. I think we've
thank you.
given our audience a ton of useful information for them to think about. And I just want to thank you both again for taking some time out of your busy schedules.
Thank you for having us.
So again, once this is, you know, finished up, I will place this on the blog and on the Instagram TV station, or IGTV, I guess it's called.
IGTV.
IGTV. And you guys can replay it as much as you want to see our lovely faces and hear all that we have to say about this topic. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having us.
I had a blast. It was fun.
I hope this was helpful.
Your faces.
Yeah.
Have fun on your vacation, Carlos.